All right, everybody, hello and welcome to Lab 3, Descriptive Statistics. This lab will be taking place in Excel. So we've sort of bounced around a little bit from Excel to SPSS. Now we're back to Excel. So we're going to do a few different things here in Excel. We're going to enter data in Excel, more data than we previously practiced with. We're going to use formulas in Excel to calculate descriptive statistics. Excel is basically a big calculator, so we're going to use many of the functions here to take a look at some data. And then we're going to make some graphs. We're going to graph some data. So we have some data visualization. So for our research scenario, we're going to take a look. All right, this is all, of course, technical, but let's say that you're conducting a survey or a study on gaming behavior and how gaming impacts a number of psychological variables. Your hypothesis states that gamers have higher hand-eye coordination as well as higher problem-solving abilities. So let's say you collect data on 20 college students, 10 of them are gamers, 10 of them aren't, they're non-gamers. So out of the gate here we have one variable of interest. We are interested in if people are gamers. All right, that's something that can vary. In this case, we're saying you either are or are not in this gaming category. So you also measure two different variables. You measure hand-eye coordination. That was one of your dependent variables of interest. We're going to measure this in minutes, right? Minutes it takes to complete a task. They're allotted up to 15 minutes to complete the task. If they don't complete it, their time is recorded as 15 minutes. Right? You also have participants complete an abstract puzzle to measure problem-solving ability. They have 5 minutes to complete this task. They either pass or fail the task. All right, so this is to guess things. We talked about different types of data in a previous topic in class. We can have data that is categorical or qualitative. We can also have data that is quantitative, right, or numbers. So we have a few different types here. So let's talk a little bit about data entry. We're going to start by entering a participant number. All right, remember if your cell is small and not showing you all of the text here, you can double click to auto-fit the cell size. And we're going to do something that we've done before. We're going to auto-fill values here because we have 20 participants. So you want to click on the fill button. So if my Excel window was bigger, all right, if it was bigger, the fill button would be right here. It looks like that's what I have in the screenshot, but if you're working with a smaller window of Excel, it will collapse into this editing tab. Fill series, all right, we want to fill in a series of values, right, we want to use 1 through 20. Go ahead and press OK, and it puts all 20 values here for us. All right, that is wonderful. So next we want to include some of our other variables. I have some information here about inputting the rest of our columns of information. The first will be the gamer column. This is how we will distinguish which participants are gamers and which aren't. And then we'll also have a column for hand-eye coordination. I'll abbreviate as HEC. And then for the problem-solving variable, so we will have these 4 columns. And then I mentioned here that we're going to code the data. All right, the data will be coded. So you might think that we could go in here and write gamer. See, I'm already misspelling. Non-gamer. You could do this, but much more simply these two categories. So for example, if someone's a gamer, we can give them a 1, and if someone is a non-gamer, we can give them a 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some of these values here. All right, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, I'm already off, it seems. All right, please hold. Let me get these values in here correctly. We have a 1, we have 2 zeros, we have a 1, 0, a 1, a 1, a 0. All right, on to 10, we have 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. Okay, something like this. So what this is telling us is that participant 1 is a gamer. All right, participant 2 is not a gamer. 1 means they are, 0 means they are not. This is a very common coding strategy for binary variables or dichotomous variables. or also called binomial variables, whatever name you want to give it. And whenever you have two options for a variable, it's very easy to give them zeros and ones. It's our simplest reduction of categories to two integers. All right, so next we have hand-eye coordination and probability, or problem-solving scores. I see my statistics brain always sees as probability, but here we have problem-solving, not probability. So I'll go ahead and put in these hand-eye coordination scores as well. Just make sure that you take your time in so you don't have any mistakes like I made. There we go. Remember, this is time in minutes. So we're not giving these codes, we're just reporting these as the time in minutes it took somebody to complete the task. As opposed to here, we only have two options, right? Think of this as like a yes or no question, right? There are only two outcomes for this variable. And same for problem solving, right? For problem solving, we have either they pass or fail. So we'll use a 1 to indicate pass and 0 if. So remember, at the end of the day here, what we're really looking for is between our gamer and non-gamer groups, right? That was your hypothesis, that gamers would have different hand-eye coordination scores, and that they would be more likely to pass this problem-solving task. So once your data is in, we're going to sort the data. We're going to sort all of the data. So what we'll do is we'll click on the first cell we want to include and hold shift and click down to the last cell that we want included. Or we can hold shift and use the arrow keys to select the areas that we want to include in our sort. So we can do it a couple different ways as well. There's a function here on the home page, right? You can sort here and do a custom sort, or you can go to data and sort. All right, so in this case, what we want to sort by is the gamer group. We want to sort by smallest to largest on gamer group. I show you all of this here. So basically what this will do is it will group our non-gamers together, right? Everybody with a code of 0, and all of our gamers together, everybody with a code of 1. So notice that if it has scrambled up our participant numbers, that's okay, right? That's similar to lab 1 in the way that it scrambles up our participant numbers when we do a sort. Just means now that we have all of our participant 2's data right here. So participant 2 is not a gamer. It took them 10 minutes to complete the hand-eye coordination task, and they did not pass the problem solving. Right, participant number 3 is not a gamer. It took them 12 minutes to complete the task, and they did pass the problem solving task. Then if we get down here, when we get to the gamer group, remember gamers have 1s in this column. We can see these participants as well, right? This is the first participant that we had taken a look at. So the next thing that I have you do here is create a little bit of space in between the two groups. So you can do that by highlighting this entire row, the row where the two parties separate here, and clicking insert. And we'll do that just a few times. I'll do it 3 more times. So we have 4 rows in between to work with. So now we have a block that is non-gamers and a block of data that belongs to gamers. So the next thing that we want to do is run some formulas on this data. So in Excel, we can write basic formulas. Excel works a little bit like a calculator. So what we'll do here is first we just want to get a sum of, or a count of, how many participants we have in each group. So to create a formula, you start with an equal sign, and then you type in what you want to do. We're just going to do a count. Then you put in an open parentheses. Then in this open parentheses, it's asking for which data you want included in this function. So you can do one of two things. You can hold shift and click the range of data that you want included. It will say here we're selecting cells A2 through A11, right? We can press enter, and it will count how many values we have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 values, right? It counted to 10. We can also do equals, count, parentheses, and then manually write in the cell range that we need. So you can do A2 and then a colon all the way to A11 and parentheses, and enter. Right. I'll also have you insert an extra column here so that you can label this new value. Right. I did that by clicking on the A column. right? And then selecting insert. So we have an extra column just the same way that we added rows, by clicking here and then right-clicking to insert. So that's our first basic formula. And we can use formulas for a variety of different things. Why don't we get an average of hand-eye coordination? So we can write equals average, okay, open parentheses, shift and select the scores and press enter. And then we have an average, so this tells us that on average, non-gamers took 10.8 minutes to complete the hand-eye coordination, task, and that's a pretty good info for us. And then next what we want to do is get a sum score. We want to get a sum score to know how many of these 10 non-gamers passed the problem-solving task. So same thing, we do equals sum parentheses and then include the data here. So only 2 individuals passed the task. So I'll go ahead and label this sum, only 2 individuals passed the task. All right, so that's good to know. We're ultimately going to compare this to the gamer group, so hang tight for some comparisons. But the next thing that we're going to do is calculate a percentage. So Excel works in such a way that you can type in sums to complete, right? Like you can type in an average. There's lots of different things that we can type in. We can do sum, we can do standard deviation. But let's go ahead and make our own formula. So we learned, right, when we did frequency tables and histograms, that we can calculate a percentage by taking frequency over n, right, or frequency over total number of values, and then multiply by 100. So if we want to know what percentage of the non-gamer group passed this task, we can take the number of successful outcomes divided by all outcomes, right? So I'm just clicking on the cells here, and I'm also going to put these into parentheses. Of course, it will complain at me. And start fresh here. All right, parentheses, the cell where we got sum, the total number of those who passed the task, divided by how many we have in this group. And then we'll multiply. You can do multiplication using the asterisk, right? So shift 8 by 100. If you press enter, we can see that 20 of the non-gamers passed the problem-solving task. The last thing I have you do in this section is bold these labels here. And then we're about to do some magic, okay? We can do something really neat here. If we copy these cells that include these calculations, right, we can go ahead and paste them in here, right? Notice something interesting here. Notice that the sums or the calculations here have automatically detected which cells to include. Calculation. So we copied here the count for cell B2 to B11, but when we copied it, it automatically changed it to count the top 10 cells above it. That's because Excel is pretty smart. It can predict in some ways what it wants you to do or what you want it to do. So if we take a look here, right, it got a different average, okay, for hand-eye coordination. And it's summed up here. We can even check here to make sure it's correct, right? If we count how many passes we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all right? And that's what it counted here. And it also calculated percent for you. Okay, so 80% of those in the gamer group passed the problem-solving task. Well, look at us go, all right? It looks something like this. This should be what you have. Make sure that you are including your calculations, right, or your formulas, these cells. So our next step is making graphs of this data. You're going to make 2 graphs. I'll show you how to make one of them. So now that you have your values for the groups, we want to visually compare them. So we're going to make something called a summary table. So we want to compare our gamers to our non-gamers. So let's compare them. Let's compare their average hand-eye coordination scores. So this is our non-gamer group. The non-gamers scored an average of 10.8 on this task. And then our gamers scored an average of 7.3 minutes on this task. Remember, the quicker they complete the task, the better their hand-eye coordination. So if we highlight these values, we're making what's called a summary table. So if we highlight these values and we go to insert, and of course I have everything highlighted over here. If we insert a graph, here's a graph, we have a little bit of a visualization of the differences in our data. Have you work a little bit with editing these graphs. Once you've selected the graph, you have an option up here called Add Chart Element, where you can add different pieces to the chart. So for example, one thing I'll have you do is delete the chart title. It seems a little bit odd, but APA and psychologists don't include chart titles. We include captions on our charts. But more importantly, what I'll have you do is label your axes to describe what's going on here. So here we have gaming behavior. And then if we add a vertical axis, add another axis here. Let's call this hand-eye coordination scores. So then at a glance, we've taken a whole cluster of information here, and we've consolidated it by coming up with some descriptive statistics. And then additionally, we can visualize those differences, the differences in the data. So there's a graph for us. I have you create one more graph, but I'll let you come up with that one. The other graph will compare percentages, because this is a different type of data. This isn't comparing averages, this is comparing something a little bit different. So you'll want to compare gamers and non-gamers and the percentage of those who passed. That's the task. So you'll put those percentages in another summary table. And then I have instructions here about how to say edit the range on your y-axis. If you double click, you can change the range. Maybe we want to make this only go to, let's see what we're, to maybe we only want this to be 11, right? Then we can take a look and see how it changes the range. But I'll have you change the range for the percentage graph. But again, I'll leave that to you. So just a few other things here. You can, with making your graphs different colors, you can change the colors on your graph. You can go with a different color. If you double click on really any portion of the graph, it will give you some options to edit and customize it. So it'd be fun to go in here and sort of make some changes. You can select just one of these bars to change the color. You can get a little crazy with it, right? You can do different colors and textures even. Of course, none of which is necessary, but it can be, you know, a little bit fun. So go ahead and just give this a try. You get more comfortable with Excel the more that you use it. So it's definitely to your benefit to get in here and play with some of these options while the assignments are easy, so you know what's available to you. Get familiar before the exercises get more difficult. So, so that's all. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on our next recording. And again, as always, if you have some